Well, it's my privilege to be joined by Mr. Ashish Chaturvedi, the head of Action for Climate and Environment at UNDP India. And of course, speaking when the COP30 is kicking off in Brazil. So, Mr. Chaturvedi, the COP30 is now upon us. And in COP29, we did witness a lack of consensus between the global north and the global south, especially on the issue of climate finance. We also saw India take a very strong stance back then on the obligations of developed countries towards the global south in terms of climate financing and also financing a transition towards a low emissions economy, which the developed world has been asking the developing world to do for quite some time. How do you see the negotiations panning out this time at COP30 specifically?
Thanks very much, Siddhartha, for having me. Climate finance is indeed playing a central role at COP30. What COP29 showed us is that the world is still trying to grapple with the sort of expectation mismatch between the developed and developing countries. India has been very consistent in articulating the need to move from broad pledges to practical adaptation action, and that ambition should be backed by predictable, accessible finance. COP30 is already being labeled the COP of adaptation, and India has played a very important role in underlying the need for globally agreed indicators for the global goal on adaptation so that countries can track real progress. And because for India, this is ultimately about making sure that adaptation translates into better safety, stronger livelihoods, and healthier ecosystems. We're already seeing how climate finance enables real adaptation on the ground. We're, for instance, working very closely with the Ministry of Environment to implement a project enhancing climate resilience of India's coastal communities with funding from the Green Climate Fund, which is the largest funding instrument of the UNFCCC. And we have, of course, technical support provided by UNDP in India to show how nature-based solutions can strengthen resilience across states such as Andhra Pradesh, Maharashtra, and Odisha. Now, their communities are restoring mangroves and other ecosystems, diversifying livelihoods, and building local adaptive capacity. So at COP30, I expect negotiations to move towards very practical solutions, simpler access to climate finance, a stronger focus on adaptation, and a finance architecture that delivers faster and more effectively. There's growing convergence on these issues, which gives us reason for cautious optimism. Back to you.
Cautious optimism, that's how you call it. Now, India has been at the forefront of a lot of these negotiations, and it's taken a lot of initiatives in the past as well to boost this cooperation and dialogue between the global north and global south. It's been one of the strongest advocates in reminding developed countries of their obligations towards developing countries in financing their transition. What can you tell us about the initiatives that India has taken, and what can we expect in terms of India's role this time around at COP30?
No, this is a very important and interesting question because I think fundamental to taking climate action to the next level is to boost cooperation between the global north and global south, but also between the global south itself. So India has been actively promoting collaboration between countries of the global south and global north to tackle climate change in practical and fair ways. Several global platforms naturally foster this cooperation. And I can give you a few examples which have been initiated by India. So for instance, the International Solar Alliance, and now with over 100 member states, is helping expand solar energy access and bring down the cost of clean power. The Coalition of Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, CDRI, equips countries with the knowledge and tools to design infrastructure that can withstand climate disasters, strengthening resilience against the growing impacts of climate change. And the International Big Cat Alliance, where the minister was yesterday launching sort of their big ministerial partnerships, brings together 95 countries along with conservation partners and scientific organizations to protect and restore big cat populations worldwide. Now, these are three examples which have been initiated by India, but India is also partner of other initiatives such as the Leadership Group for Industry Transition, which has been launched by India and Sweden jointly. And on finance, India has been emphasizing that the new collective quantified goal should ensure climate finance is predictable, accessible, and focused on adaptation. Finally, initiatives like Mission Life, which was launched by the Prime Minister in Glasgow, encourages people to adopt sustainable lifestyles, complementing technology, finance, and policy. So, in sum, India is using its domestic climate experience and global partnerships to create real solutions, share knowledge, and support fair and just climate action across the world.
So, Mr. Chaturvedi, now, what are our priorities as a country at COP30, and what outcomes, tangible outcomes, should India hope to achieve?
Yeah, I've recently written about this as well. So I think these priorities are fairly clear and consistent. First, because of the growing vulnerabilities of India to the climate change impacts, I think the first priority is definitely to advance the adaptation agenda. So particularly operationalizing adaptation indicators under the UAE BELEM work program so that countries can measure real progress on resilience and adaptation outcomes. So this is definitely a high priority, and the minister actually spoke even in his national statement just yesterday. I think the second priority is strengthening and simplifying access to finance, especially for adaptation. India has been calling for more predictable and needs-based support for developing countries. The third area is about accelerating technology transfer and capacity building, essentially to help countries implement their nationally determined contributions and long-term low-emission development strategies effectively. Finally, I think India's agenda is also to ensure that transitions, energy transitions, or any kind of transition which is triggered by climate change remains just and inclusive, aligned with national development priorities. India has been advancing this approach through initiatives such as the Global Biofuels Alliance, launched through its G20 presidency, which promotes affordable and sustainable energy pathways for the global south. So therefore, India's position continues to be guided by principles of equity and common but differentiated responsibilities to ensure that global ambition is matched with fairness, access, and adequate support for those who need it most.
So that's as far as the stand that India is likely to take. Now, climate justice is also a very critical theme, especially when it comes to developing nations. And I'm also speaking about the importance of just transition here, the idea of just transition. As India begins to embrace the pursuit of a cleaner and a greener economy and meet its international obligations as well in terms of cutting down emissions or setting net zero targets, how are we ensuring that the transition that India undertakes within its territories is indeed just? So if a coal mine is going to make way for another alternative, then what happens to lives and livelihoods reliant on that particular plant or that particular source? How are we ensuring that this transition is going to be just?
No, thanks very much. I think, again, sort of very well articulated question. I think a just transition means putting people at the center of the shift to a cleaner economy. India is moving fast on renewable energy, but it's also ensuring that workers and communities dependent on fossil fuel-based sectors are supported. I can give you an example of our work in the coal-dependent state of Jharkhand, where significant amount of state revenues come from coal mining even now. At UNDP, we work very closely with the State Task Force on Sustainable Just Transition. Together with the state government, we recently launched a report which was entitled From Dependence to Diversification, Building a Future-Ready Workforce in Jharkhand. So precisely the question that you asked, when a coal mine is shut down, what happens to people's lives and livelihoods? So the report actually maps out a roadmap for the future on economic diversification. It covers 9 priority sectors, including agriculture, construction, renewable energy, manufacturing, and services. And the study shows very stark numbers that by 2050, Jharkhand could reduce carbon emissions by up to 60%. It could cut pollution by 57%, prevent 17,800 or well 18,000 premature deaths, and save nearly 6% of its gross state domestic product. At the same time, in this process of transition, we create new jobs and strengthen local economies. So I think we have to keep in mind that a just transition isn't just about clean energy. It's about being socially inclusive, economically fair, and environmentally responsible. This is the approach that the state of Jharkhand is taking, and I think the government of India backs this kind of an approach. And it is exactly the kind of work that we want to support at UNDP through technical assistance, planning, and capacity development.
Finally, Mr. Chaturvedi, what's your overall assessment of where we stand today in terms of the goals that have been decided and agreed upon as far as the Paris Agreement is concerned? How strongly is India abiding by what's being prescribed, and where do you see us headed?
So I think independent estimates suggest that India remains fully aligned with the Paris Agreement and is among the few G20 countries on track and in some areas ahead of its NDC targets. So for instance, non-fossil fuel sources contribute nearly half of India's total installed power capacity as of June 2025, and the target has been achieved well before 2030, which was the original timeline. The emission intensity of GDP has been reduced by over 36% between 2005 and 2020. Solar capacity has expanded from 2.8 gigawatt to nearly 120 gigawatts today, showing strong growth in clean energy. There are energy transition initiatives like the National Green Hydrogen Mission, the Prime Minister Kusum program, which is about solar water pumps, and FAME, which are helping accelerate to cleaner energy system. On adaptation, India is updating national and state action plans to address evolving risks and is in the process of preparing the National Adaptation Plan, which is led by the Ministry of Environment and with UNDP's technical support under Green Climate Fund project. Overall, I think India is showing that development and decarbonization can go hand in hand, moving to a low carbon climate resilient pathway. And I think I just want to end by emphasizing that although much has been achieved, I think there is still a lot of way forward that we need to accelerate our transition to a low carbon resilient pathway. And for that, we need, of course, finance, but also significant enhancement in capacities, especially amongst our institutions, to respond to these challenges.
All right, Mr. Chaturvedi, many thanks for joining us and shedding light on this. And of course, India is a country that has aspirations of being the voice of the global South as well, which it has become. And many countries would be looking very closely at the stands we take and what we articulate at such multinational fora with respect to developmental goals and, of course, also green transition and combating climate change, among other priorities. Many thanks for speaking to us about this.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much for having me.